Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Native hunters face an uphill battle in exercising their treaty rights on ceded land. And it's not just hunting. The same applies to undertakings ranging from salmon fishing to harvesting wild rice. Concepts that have largely been settled after decades of legal decisions remain a source of contention by non-Native observers. Today we'll zero in on Shoshone-Bannock hunting rights history and hear perspectives on constant challenges against Native hunting and fishing across the country. That's coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull, sitting in for Antonia Gonzalez. Last week, more than a dozen tribes commented on a proposal by the Trump administration to let developers obtain preliminary permits for hydropower projects on reservations in spite of tribal opposition. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio has more.
This new rule would apply to projects like dams, reservoirs, and pump storage facilities, all overseen by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which, under a Biden-era rule, does not issue such permits without consent. That independent agency is now being asked to change course by Energy Secretary Chris Wright.
He put tribes in the same sentence as third parties. And what that tells me is that there's that lack of respect.
Stuart Koya-Mtiwa is the Hopi Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and commented on behalf of his tribe. As for their neighbors in northern Arizona, the Navajo Nation thinks dialogues with future developers have improved.
What we've seen is contrary to, I think, what was included in the letter for the request for rulemaking from the Secretary, that the policy has not, in fact, hindered development on the nation.
Navajo Acting Assistant Attorney General Erica Perot, who penned their brief, wants an extension. Tribes had only 17 days to reply while dealing with the longest U.S. government shutdown.
We received notice of this October 27th. It's been a pretty tight turnaround.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
Young Native people from across the country are gathered in Seattle this week, developing their leadership skills and discussing tribal issues, including sovereignty and policy making. They're taking part in the National Congress of American Indians Youth Convention, which is being held alongside NCAI's annual convention. Shania Wachinio is an 8th grade student from the Saboba Band in Southern California.
I'm with TANF program from Saboba, and just going to the conferences to learn new things. Learning other Native American tribes, their traditions, and what other people like, their stories and everything.
Crystal Williams, vice chair of the Coushatta tribe of Louisiana, says it's important to have young people be part of NCAI's gathering.
To me, it's very important as a tribal leader. I've been in this for a decade now, and it's so important for me to make sure that our youth know about leadership, how to run tribes, because they will be, the ones that are going to be handling this here in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So I am an advocate for youth, in leadership. So I feel like we have the responsibility to teach them as much as we can.
161 young people ages 14 to 24 are attending the youth convention. They're also encouraged to attend the main NCAI general sessions and meetings to hear from tribal leaders from across Indian country. Both events run through Friday. And on this day in 1895, the Nez Perce Indian Reservation in Idaho was opened up to white settlers. After encroachment, war, and a gold rush compromised the previous treaty's defined boundaries, prevailing white sentiment deemed the unfarmed and undeveloped areas as surplus, leading to the further breaking up of lands held by the Namipu. And it's also the birthday of Wilma Mankiller, born in 1945. She became the first woman to be elected principal chief of the Cherokee Nation. A lifelong advocate of Native and women's rights, Mankiller said she was largely inspired by the 1969 occupation of Alcatraz by indigenous activists. She died in 2010 with friend and feminist icon Gloria Steinem by her side. This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bull.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com. Support from Clarkson Potter, publisher of Turtle Island, Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America by Native American chef Sean Sherman. With ancestral and modern recipes, this cookbook showcases diverse foodways of the continent's regions.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The legal justifications for tribal hunting rights were largely settled decades ago following landmark rulings, such as the Bolt decision in Washington state. More recently, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of tribal hunting access on ceded lands in Idaho. The rights are guaranteed in treaties with the federal government signed a century or more ago. But individual hunters, anglers, and others who exercise those rights, providing for their families and communities, are frequently challenged by non-native observers or even law enforcement officers. That includes a fight going on right now over hunting rights between Oklahoma tribes and that state's governor. You can join our conversation today by calling 1-800-996-2848. How have your tribal hunting rights been challenged by outsiders? Let us know. That number also is 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us from Fort Hall, Idaho is Dr. Cleve Davis. He is an author, cattle rancher, and scientist with a PhD in environmental science, and he's the author of the book, So Long as Game May Be Found Thereon, about the 1896 Ward v. Racehorse Supreme Court case that affirmed the right of Bannock citizens to hunt outside of their reservation in the state of Wyoming. Cleve is a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. Cleve, good morning and welcome to Native America Calling.
Morning, Sean. Thank you.
Joining us from Cloquet, Minnesota is Charlie Smith. He is an advisor for Indigenous Business Consulting Firm and a member of the Fond du Lac Band Ceded Territory Conservation Committee. He's from the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Charlie, hello, and welcome to the Native America Calling.
Bonjour. Thanks for having me.
Bonjour. It's good to have you on the show, Charlie. And joining us from McAllister, Oklahoma is Derek James. He's a reporter for nondoc.com, and he's Choctaw. Derek, hello. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Halito, Sean. It is nice to be here.
Halito. Well, I want to go ahead and begin with Cleve today because tribal treaty rights are playing out in Idaho as we speak. And we will get to these recent developments, but I want to begin with the hunting rights that you wrote about, Cleve, going back to 1896. What bearing does that treaty hold for hunting now today?
Well, today I would say it's been that case, the Ward v. Racehorse case, has been invalidated by the 2019 Herrera decision. The Supreme Court in 2019 basically said that case is no longer law, and the right to hunt in unoccupied lands in the United States, so long as game may be found thereon, still exists, and it survives statehood in Wyoming. And so I would say that the issue there is that the state of Wyoming is not going by that ruling, and they're still fighting it.
Now, again, the title of your book, So Long as Game May Be Found Thereon. Tell us more about what that phrase means and its origin.
Well, the name comes from the actual treaty language in Article 4 of the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868, and it's also in the Crow Treaty. It says, the Indians herein named agree when the agency house and other buildings shall be constructed on their reservations named, they will make the said reservation their permanent home and they will make no permanent settlement elsewhere, but they shall have the right to hunt on the unoccupied lands of the United States, so long as game may be found thereon, and so long as peace subsists among the whites and Indians on the borders of the hunting districts. And so that's where the name comes from. And I originally put it in the book because that part of the treaty, that clause of the treaty, is almost always overlooked, and it's been overlooked up until recently, 2023, with the Northwest Band of Shoshone Nation case against Idaho.
And why is it overlooked? Give us a little more background.
I can't tell you why they overlook it. A lot of these court cases, like the Ward v. Racehorse one, the original one, the Supreme Court said that it was a temporary right, and when the state became a state, it basically invalidated the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868. So it survived for like a handful of years, and then it invalidated it. And but it's yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's why we're having this show, because again, obviously, these hunting rights, they're in question now. So let's talk a little bit more. Just this year, a federal court of appeals agreed that tribal citizens have a right to hunt on ceded lands off the reservation. Now, this is not a challenge by the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. What are the ramifications of that decision?
The thing about these court cases, and what I've learned, is like each tribe and treaty has a unique situation and set of conditions. And when they take these cases to court, they have to look at the specifics of what happened, who was hunting, where they were hunting, what does the treaty language say, how did the Indians that signed those treaties likely interpret the negotiations. So they'll go back to those negotiations and try to come up with an interpretation on what these Indian headmen thought at that time. And so my book focuses mostly on the Fort Bridger Treaty 1868, but these other treaties, they have different unique languages in them. And so like the Nez Perce up there and the Yakima, they have like open and unclaimed lands and where they exercise their treaty rights. Us, we have a little slightly different. And so the specifics matter is what I'm saying.
How big a win do you think this is?
Oh man, it's hard to say on things like that. All these cases I've looked at, there's never like a clear exact win on things. And there's always a little bit of whittling away on the right, and sometimes there's a win, sometimes there's not. Like this Northwest Band case against Idaho, that was widely touted here, Fort Hall, that it was a win, and because they basically said, I read that whole clause for a purpose, because there's part of it talks about making the reservation your permanent home. And then it says, but shall have the right to hunt on unoccupied lands. And so the state of Idaho is saying, well, you can't hunt because the Northwest Band, you can't hunt in Idaho because you don't have a permanent reservation. And so that was the court case in that situation. They reversed it, said you don't have to be on a reservation to exercise your treaty right. And so that opened it up. Like my tribe here at that time, we were not allowing non-reservation residents to hunt off reservation. And when they did that, when that court case happened, they opened it up for everybody. So it was like a win. But if you read the court case too, it also says they started defining, well, what is unoccupied lands of the United States? And then they said something like it's ancestral homelands, whatever that is. And then the Shoshone-Bannock tribes weren't even a part of that case. And so like that case in effect may have implications to our tribe. And so each of these cases, when they go to federal court, it could have impacts to other tribes that may not even be part of it. And that, how it's federal law works. It's crazy like that.
Yeah, it is. And Cleve, before the show, we were chatting a little bit, and what I like about your book is the fact that this is a book specifically related to hunting and treaties. And there are a lot of other books out there about treaties, and there are a lot of books about sovereignty, but there aren't a lot of books about what you have written about, specifically hunting treaties. And I want to ask you, how important do you think protecting hunting rights is in regard to the overall discussions we have today about tribal sovereignty?
I think it's like the foundation of tribal sovereignty. And I say that because the way the U.S. effectively subdued many tribal nations was by wiping out the game and putting them on the reservations and making them dependent upon the government, their rations. When we were hunting and providing for ourselves and organizing to go get these resources and hunting off the reservation, and well, there wasn't even reservations then, but we were hunting and taking care of stuff. That was our independence. That was our sovereignty. And in my opinion, the chiefs recognized that that was part of our identity, our culture, and our survival. And so for that reason, they expressly retained that right to hunt on unoccupied lands because they knew it was important. And that they were smart in doing that and wise, because even today, like today, things are starting to get harder, especially like during the government shutdown. More people are expressing interest in hunting and exercising their right because money's getting short, but they could go get some game. And so I think it's crucial, because that alone, that's how come they wiped the buffaloes out. That's one of the main reasons. That's why they wiped these game out. They took guns away. We couldn't provide food for ourselves. And so it's really important.
Dr. Cleve Davis, starting our conversation here today on Native America Calling, talking about hunting rights, tribal hunting rights, and different areas of the country and how they are being impacted. We've got the phone lines open now for any of our listeners who would like to join this conversation. Just pick up your phone and call us. Maybe you are a hunter yourself, and you can relate to some of these issues we're talking about, or you're familiar with hunting laws where you live and how they work, or maybe a hunting treaty that has oversight with regard to how you and your family hunt and maybe have hunted for generations. Give us a call. We'd like to hear from you. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Environmental and human rights groups accuse the UN of fueling a crackdown on indigenous people at the COP30 summit in Brazil. The action comes as indigenous people once again protest what they say is the exclusion of their voices in the global meeting to address top environmental challenges going forward. We'll hear from indigenous representatives about this year's gathering on the next Native America Calling.
The Indian Arts and Crafts Act protects authentic American Indian and Alaska Native artists and craftspeople and their art and craftwork. Under the Act, it is illegal to market art or craftwork misrepresented as American Indian, Indian, Native American, or Alaska Native made, or as the product of a particular Indian tribe. Reporting potential Act violations can be done at doi.gov/IACB or at 1-888-ART-FAKE. Support provided by Indian Arts and Crafts Board.
Thank you for tuning in to Native America Calling. We're talking about tribal hunting rights today. What do you know about your tribal hunting, fishing, and gathering rights? Is it a frequent topic of conversation at your dinner table? Join our conversation. Just give us a call. 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Our next guest, Derek James, joins us from McAlester, Oklahoma. He's a reporter for nondoc.com. And Derek, it is prime deer and turkey season in Oklahoma right now, and there is a major disagreement about tribal hunting rights between the state of Oklahoma, Governor Kevin Stitt, of course, who is Cherokee, and the state's Attorney General. Governor Stitt is demanding any tribal citizen without a hunting permit be prosecuted. The Attorney General advises wildlife enforcement officers to not charge tribal members. Fill us in. Give us an update now. What is the latest?
All right. So the latest is, as of last week, Governor Stitt, he he has appointed a special prosecutor to prosecute these tickets that are issued against tribal members here in eastern Oklahoma. So basically, there's been at least 2 tickets that we know of that have been dismissed by the state AG, Gentner Drummond, one in Pushmataha County and one in Marshall County. Those 2 tickets were dismissed because they were tribal members hunting within tribal lands. But Stitt, he has the special prosecutor, Russell Cochran. He has refiled those citations against those 2 tribal members.
Okay, Kevin Stitt has hired a special prosecutor to investigate what he deems are these tribal hunting violations. What authority does that person have in relation to the state attorney general?
The authority is there is a state statute that allows Kevin Stitt to appoint these special prosecutors, but it does butt up against the AG's power. So as of right now, it is just a power struggle between the governor and the AG on that.
You mentioned a power struggle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the attorney general is planning on running for governor of Oklahoma. Do you think this is at the heart of it, this political rivalry in the dispute, or is it a different type of power struggle?
It might be a little column A and a little column B. Drummond has always been, most part on the sides of the tribes, at least on tribal issues. So, it might be that, and then it also might be a move on politics as well.
Now, this all relates to the ongoing fight that Governor Stitt has mounted since the McGirt decision gave tribes certain jurisdictions there in Oklahoma. What are the tribes saying now? What is their response?
As of right now, I think they're pretty keeping quiet. I think they're just sitting back and watching to see if this thing ends up into a bigger court case.
And these 2 folks that have received tickets and they were initially dismissed, and now it looks like they could face charges again or have to show up in court. Give us a little more detail in terms of where they were and what they were involved in when they were first cited.
Okay, so the first guy, hold on, let me write my notes here. The first guy, his name is Sean Robertson. He was hunting within the Hugo Wildlife Management Area, which is here in southeast Oklahoma. A game warden pulled up on him and found him. He was wearing his camo, and he had a bow. He had a bow and arrow with him, and he admitted to hunting. And the game warden cited him. The Hugo Wildlife Management Area, it is state. It's basically a state-owned area. The second guy was in Marshall County, and he was hunting within federal lands, the Chickasaw National Recreational Area. So that's one of the questions that will probably have to be answered. What is tribal land? What is state land? What is federal land? What's allowed? What's not allowed?
Okay. What is the history of tribal hunting there in Oklahoma? That'll help put this conversation into more context.
Yeah, so back around 2015 and 2016, the 5 tribes here in eastern Oklahoma, they signed compacts with the state to allow the state to issue basically a hunting and fishing license to tribal members that wish to have one. The tribes agreed to a set amount of money to give to the state. The state, in return, gave these licenses to tribal members. And that worked great for 5-6 years until about 2021, when Stitt basically did not renew those compacts with the tribes. And then from there, the tribes basically issued their own laws and statutes for hunting. Basically, they allowed any tribal member to hunt within their reservation lands as long as they had their tribal membership. And that worked for up until October, and that is when the State Wildlife Department issued a memo to all of its game wardens that, hey, this recent a recent decision by the Oklahoma Supreme Court in Strobel versus the Oklahoma Tax Commission, which is basically a tax-related case, basically not basically saying that McGirt did not apply to civil cases. So the State Wildlife Department was using that as its basis to issue its guidance to game wardens.
I'm going to read part of a statement from the Choctaw Nation. The Choctaw Nation will defend the rights of our tribal members and our nation against intimidation and harassment and violation of tribal and federal law. Any tribal member who receives a citation or has personal items confiscated by an Oklahoma game warden while fishing or hunting within the boundaries of one of the 5 tribes' reservations should contact the Choctaw Nation Tribal Public Defender's Office. Derek, that sounds to me like Choctaw Nation is gearing up for a major jurisdictional fight with the state of Oklahoma. How is this going to play out?
It sounds like it's going to end up into more drawn-out court cases, even though it's already been agreed with treaty law and federal law. So, lots of more fighting in the future, it sounds like.
How much of this is financial? You mentioned earlier that the earlier compacts, the tribes paid the state for these licenses that were issued to tribal members. Now the state's not getting that revenue. Is it substantial?
I don't recall the exact number. I do know that the state receives a lot of federal money, depending on how many hunting and fishing licenses that they gave out. And I knew when, and if I recall, that was a few $1 million that were lost after the compacts were not renewed from the federal government.
Okay. Now, Derek, you, of course, are also a Choctaw Nation member. And what are folks saying, other tribal citizens saying with regard to, again, there are these jurisdictional issues. Now we're talking about hunting rights. You mentioned the case with the income tax reporting. Are folks confused right now in terms of what their responsibilities are, which government entities they need to answer to, and what their specific rights are or are not?
Yes. There is a lot of confusion. There are actually some people that are probably scared to hunt right now because they don't know if they have to spend the money for a state license, and some don't want to deal with the game warden. So yes, there is a lot of confusion right now.
Okay. I've been out hunting enough to know, game wardens, sometimes they're really tough people to deal with. They can really come on pretty hard on a person, and you're out there alone sometimes in the woods or in some area where you're hunting. Have there been any types of conflicts at this point, or are any concerns that this could get pretty nasty out there when someone's hunting or when someone's out there exercising their right?
As of now, I've not heard of any, big conflicts out there. For the most part, hunters respect game wardens, and game wardens respect hunters, at least in this part of the country. So, as of right now, I have not heard of any, big conflicts outside.
All right, let's go ahead and take a caller now. This is Shell, who is listening up in Fort Hall, Idaho, on station KISU. Hello, Shell. It's good to have you calling in today. It's been a while.
Appreciate y'all so much, Sean. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Shell.
Yeah, the 1868 Fort Bridger Treaty, the Bannocks used to call it Pagi Tuviwa Yaduap. Like it was Pagi was Bannock, and he was kind of like an overseer of, all the bands of the Bannocks, the Snake River bands and the upper mountain area bands and the plains bands. And, they had their leaders, but he was the one that spoke for all of them. And later on, they made the treaties, different treaties, because the agency was in 2 different places. But back in 1973, there was some hunters that went out to hunt big game. It's called the Tino case, Tino versus Idaho. You know, and they had interpreters, and Professor Liljeblad was interpreting it through the native tongue, you know, like their language to interpret it, because the Bannocks used to call it, well, today they call it a maimwa, but back then the little older word was hilmai. I'm going hilmai, I'm going hunting, you know. And, you know, so they had to interpret all that and sort all the language out. So they were able to settle that. And I guess it eventually got settled, but, you know, I was always in the assumption to go just with your tribal ID to go hunt. But I hear now that you got to get your tags and you got to get a permission slip, and you got to go to certain areas, where I was just used to taking all my nephews out and just going out and bag. You know, we don't shoot for antlers or anything. We just, you know, go for the hide and the meat or whatever you can harvest up there. And that was, you know, like what I was used to, and I'm still kind of used to that. So that's, you know, like my opinion about it. You know, thanks for putting me on today.
Well, Shell, I always appreciate it when you call in. You have so much knowledge. You just share so much with our listeners. Really appreciate you explaining some of that history, as well as your own connection, your family connection to hunting there in Idaho, in Fort Hall area. Of course, Shoshone Bannock tribes. That was Shell, listening on station KISU. And I want to go back to Derek James, and of course he is a reporter for nondoc.com. He's in McAlester, Oklahoma. And Derek, what are your thoughts here with regard to some of these other issues that we're talking about, learning about in other parts of the country, and then reflecting back on what's happening in Oklahoma? And do you see parallels here, or are we dealing with very different issues with regard to sovereignty and hunting and fishing rights?
I feel like there are a lot of similarities with fights all across the nation, you know, against Indian country and other sovereign nations. I don't know what the recent uptick is, and I don't know if it'll ever end. You know, it's just one of those. I don't know.
All right, thank you. The number to call the show, anyone else who would like to join our conversation, we got the phone lines open. Just call 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's talk now with Charlie Smith. He is an advisor for Indigenous Business Consulting Firm and a member of the Fond du Lac Band Ceded Territory Conservation Committee. And Charlie, you've been challenged recently by non-native individuals for exercising your treaty rights. Tell us about that.
Who's you, Sean? So I've been hunting since I was 13 years old. I'm 37 now, going to be 38 in December. And recently I went out deer hunting, and it's frustrating sometimes when you go hunting within the reservation boundaries. It's our own land. Because of the Dawes Allotment Act, a lot of it's checkered. And I happened to find some good areas that we recently have bought back. It's next to a cornfield and another field that are owned by non-native people. And as I'm about to go bow hunting, and rifle season is open September 1st until January 1st, and bow hunting same time for us on reservation and within our ceded territory. And so I'm a bow hunter. I like bow hunting. So I'm decked out in camo. I'm getting ready to go hunt. I'm parked on the side of the road where I'm about to walk in the woods. And as I'm about to hop out, I see a car pull off the highway, and it's going down the road, speed limit, 30 miles per hour, maybe 35. And as soon as that person seeing my tribal plates, comes to a complete stop, lets out his German Shepherd, runs him up and down the road where I'm hunting, trying to chase out the deer. And it's so as tribal people, even within our own boundaries, we still deal with some ignorance or people not wanting us to be successful in the woods.
Charlie, how did you respond to that when you were challenged like that with that dog out there and here you were out in the woods hunting?
I took some pictures of the vehicle and the dog and how the person came up and down. And I'm on the Fond du Lac Ceded Territory Committee, and we use our Ceded Territory Committee and our on-reservation committee to help set the limits and seasons for game and fishing and harvesting on Fond du Lac and in our ceded territories. So I'm really good friends with a lot of and related to almost all of the game wardens that we have for Fond du Lac. And so I gave them a call right away, sent them the pictures, and told them that I asked them to contact this person and just to teach them that, or can't be harassing tribal hunters within reservation, as well as working to correct some ignorance.
We're going to take another short break. We'll be back. We'll continue our conversation with Charlie Smith. Phone lines are still open for listeners who would like to join us. 1-800-99-NATIVE.
Once agnixi mankuwayazan ye apiki yaniktelo la kozani wawoki ki oboglakayo takucha yakakhriki ki onichiapiktelo isama soliachihanta lelyayo healthcare.gov/nishlelyayo nishlelmas aphayo 1-800-318-2596 lewot khaniki Medicare and Medicaid otietahi apelo.
Thanks for listening to Native America Calling. We're talking about exercising tribal hunting rights today, and there's still plenty of time for listeners to join our conversation. Do you hunt or fish? If so, do you find yourself having to explain your rights to hunt, fish, or gather to outsiders? Let us know. You can give us a call at 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848. Let's continue our conversation now with Charlie Smith. He is from the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And Charlie, today we're talking about ceded territory defined in a treaty. Give us the history of that decision.
So our landmark case was the 1837 treaty that was settled in the early 90s with the Mille Lacs Band, and then we quickly settled it as a Fond du Lac reservation. And that opened the doors for us to hunt, fish, and gather within our 1837 territory that is south of us here on Fond du Lac, going towards Mille Lacs and then going all the way into Wisconsin. And then most recently, we settled the 1842 ceded territory, which is in northern Wisconsin going into northern Michigan. And then we settled alone the 1854 ceded territory, which is north of us all the way to the Canadian border. And so Fond du Lac is in a unique position to have settled these three treaty areas that we can hunt, fish, and gather all the way to the Canadian border and then all the way over to the northern part of Michigan.
Now, how do your hunting rights differ from the hunting rights of non-native residents there in Minnesota and Wisconsin? Because you shared earlier about this individual who saw your tags, saw you hunting, and just released a dog. Obviously they are upset. They don't feel they have the same rights. Tell me more.
It's something that we deal with even during our netting and spearing in the spring. People in Wisconsin, I've seen on social media that they still get their tires slashed. We still get harassed on the boat landings from time to time. And it's going to take some time to keep on educating the general public of what what our rights are and what we have retained, and especially even teaching people that, I'm going to quote my good friend Roland Hill, who is one of the partners at Indigenous Business Advisors. He shares all the time that we granted everybody who weren't Indigenous people those rights for people to live here, for people to work here, for people to build businesses here, for everybody to be here. And we are the grantors of those rights, and we have retained our rights of our land. And I think that's really important for people to understand and even learn, that for them to have an opportunity to hunt, and they can hunt as of right now, people can hunt within our boundaries of Fond du Lac Reservation by going into our conservation office and paying whatever the fee is to get the tribal land use permit. And it's that easy for us to grant our rights, or to share our land with non-Indigenous people. And we just need more education out there. And I think Minnesota is doing a great thing. I think Minnesota, and working with Wisconsin, we have the Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife Conservation Committee. They work with all those ceded territories, the 1854, 1837, 1842, and 1836. And Minnesota recently, through the state government, they have a big push to do tribal liaisons and much of their governmental role. So there's Brad Harrington, who works with the Department of Natural Resources. He's the tribal liaison director. He'll be stepping down in February, but we need another good person to keep teaching what we have retained as Indigenous people within the state of Minnesota. So I think Minnesota's going in the right direction. I think Wisconsin working with Glyphwick and Michigan working with Glyphwick, as well as Minnesota, I think we're doing better than we were. There's still a lot of work ahead of us.
Charlie, you mentioned that non-Indigenous people can purchase a permit to hunt on these ceded lands, but I'm curious to know, do many non-Indigenous people actually purchase those permits and then go out and hunt? About how many?
I don't have the numbers for that. As a ceded territory committee member, I'm torn at that. A lot of our ancestors lost their language, culture, their own land, their own ways, and to just freely grant out the use of our land to non-Indigenous people. Part of me doesn't want that to happen, and then a part of me wants to share the resources as much as anybody else. And Red Lake is a whole different story. The Red Lake Reservation in northwest Minnesota, they have retained all of their land base. They have 1 million acres of shared resources that's only accessible to Red Lake band members, and I think that's a great thing. I think they have had a really foresight to know to protect the land and not allot it, not divvy it up between band members and then lose it to tax forfeiture, which really happened on Fond du Lac.
Now, Charlie, you wrote an opinion piece for the Minnesota Star Tribune about these treaty rights. I'm curious to know what prompted you to pick that topic and what type of feedback you've received.
So the opinion piece was written by NPR Rural Voices, and so they reached out to us at working at Indigenous Business Advisors to see if we would want to collaborate and talk about tribal hunting. And we met with them, we sat down, we had a good conversation, and we felt like it would be a good project to participate in and try to educate the public of what we have retained as Native people in Minnesota, Indigenous people in Minnesota. And that I think if more pieces like that and more opportunities to be on radio shows, podcasts, TV shows, whatever, to help educate the general public. Even adding curriculum to public schooling. I think it all helps us move towards a better future of being able to collaborate and work together and find more similarities than differences.
Now, there's also a contentious history in Minnesota over walleye fishing, and I'm interested to know if that has been largely resolved and if that experience has helped educate state residents about treaty rights. What's your thought?
I think it's gotten better since I was a kid. I remember going out as a kid on Mille Lacs Lake spearing and fishing, and people would be throwing rocks at us from the shores. They would be cussing and swearing at us. And, being at 13 years old, I didn't understand why, at that time, I didn't understand people hated us just because we had retained those rights and we were brown and we were out there doing something that they felt like they were missing out on, or we were taking resources away from them. It still happens once in a while, but it's very far and few between nowadays in Mille Lacs. But in Wisconsin, the Ojibwe people that spear and net down there, they still deal with some ignorance down there, and where they're getting their tires slashed from time to time. And maybe our game wardens protect us a lot more. They stay on our landings. In Fond du Lac, we have six or seven or eight game wardens that we employ full time, and they're with us during the moose hunt. They're with us during our netting and spearing. They're with us out there when we're harvesting wild rice, and they're out there when we're deer hunting. So we have a lot of support with the law enforcement around Fond du Lac and when we go into our ceded territory.
You mentioned wild rice harvesting, and you also wrote about that in your op-ed. Do wild rice cultivators, do they encounter any of this type of opposition that we're talking about?
I'm not sure if they encounter any of the opposition as cultivators. Red Lake Nation, again, I'm going to throw that out there. Red Lake does have their own cultivated wild rice processing plant up there, and they produce millions of pounds of wild rice, and then they have their walleye from their lake. Red Lake has done something that, if there's another pandemic, that they're able to feed and sustain themselves up there and help each other out with resources that they have built up for themselves. It's amazing things that Indigenous people are doing all across the country and north of us into Canada.
Sure, yeah. Charlie, obviously, of course, you are a hunter and you fish, and as I understand it, your father, your grandfather, they taught you about how to get out in the woods, how to do these activities, and your children are learning as well. Tell me more, talk more about the connection to Ojibwe culture that these activities have, and what benefits overall for a community to go out and be able to hunt, be able to fish, be able to gather.
So as Ojibwe people, we really believe that it's a gift to be able to do those things as hunting. In our language, we call it Giwo Sewen. And when we go out there and hunt it, and we take an animal, one of the things that we're supposed to do, especially our first kill, we're supposed to give that deer away and take good care of it. We believe as Ojibwe people, every one of those animals have a gift that they were given from the Creator, and you're supposed to take care of those gifts. You're supposed to know which parts of the animal that is. So for deer, for instance, it's the spleen. You're supposed to hang that spleen up as high as the deer stands, along with the moose. We take care of the moose beards. If people drive around and they might see a moose beard in a tree about as tall as a moose, we hang those up as well, because that's what they were given as their gift from the Creator. And being taught some of this stuff from my grandpa and my dad, they would teach me about the woods. They would always say, make us walk through the woods when we were kids. Even though we were scared, we didn't know what we were walking into. They would tell us what we would be walking up and walking into, what we would see along the way, and to always be mindful of our surroundings, to know what we're walking through. So they're both Marines too. My grandfather was a Marine. He was in Korea, Trojan Reservoir. My dad was in Vietnam. So a lot of the orientation that they taught us might have been military as well. So using the sun always, if we're walking in a certain direction, my dad would always say, look where the sun is at that time and use it. If it's on your right shoulder, keep it on your right shoulder and walk straight. And I'd never get lost in the woods. And my grandpa would always say, you can't get lost in your own kitchen.
What about other tribal members? Are many families going out there and hunting still and working to maintain a subsistence lifestyle?
That's like a back and forth type deal right now. So one of the things that we see on our ceded territory committee is that if it's going out harvesting fish, people have to get hired to cut up the fish and then bag that fish up and give it to the elders or give it to certain families that are in need. And people aren't looking to learn some of those life skills that they need to, in order to take game, in order to fish, or in order to snare. A lot of people don't know how to snare a rabbit or skin a rabbit or cook it. Along with deer, if you get a deer, what do you do next? How do you gut a deer, skin it? How do you quarter it? And then we go into some of the traditions. If it's putting down our food and our tobacco at our ceremonial drums, or even just ceremonies within our own homes for the first kill of the year, or the or first take of the year if it's wild rice, and giving thanks to the spirits for taking good care of us. It's a huge thing that we still do as Ojibwe people, as some of us do. It's educating people within our own communities that these things are important for us to do as Ojibwe people to maintain our own spiritual health.
Charlie, we have time for one more question and then we have to wrap it up. But I know that you are a language speaker. And do you see a strong connection between being a language speaker and maintaining these traditional practices of hunting and fishing that you describe?
Yes, I do. I think you learn the cultural importance if you understand your language and you can speak to elders. They will tell you, if you get a moose, hang up the beard, and they'll tell you why. If you get a deer, hang up that spleen. If you get your first kill, do the ceremony to have somebody talk in the language and speak for you, so you can have good luck for the rest of your life to be able to do those things. Or if it's fishing, if it's going pick your wild rice for the first time, there's always a first thing that we do as Ojibwe people, that we give somebody tobacco, and we pass them the tobacco, and we ask an elder or somebody that can speak the language to talk for you, so you can be successful for the rest of your life. And that if you leave that for a short period of time, that your life brings you back to that.
All right. We are out of time. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation for today. I want to thank our guests who joined us, Dr. Cleve Davis, Derek James, and Charlie Smith. We'll be back tomorrow for a discussion about the progress and concerns of indigenous groups at the Global Climate Summit in Brazil. Hope you'll tune in. Until then, I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling.
Support for journalism that raises the awareness of child well-being to citizens and to policymakers provided by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, building a brighter future for children, families, and communities. Information at aecf.org.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.